Diddy's daughters are in absolute distress as shocking new revelations about their father's deteriorating health behind bars have come to light. In a heartbreaking turn of events, sources close to the family have revealed that his daughters are now speaking out, breaking their silence as they struggle to cope with the reality of what's happening to their father in prison. With tears in their eyes, they've reportedly told close friends, "We're losing him." The situation is worse than anyone could have imagined, and the family is now in full crisis mode as Diddy's condition continues to spiral out of control.
P. Diddy's on suicide watch tonight. Do your sources confer the same information? Are they saying it was possible?
Hey, real quickly, all that commissary stuff, he's not getting any of that because people in the SHU have an abbreviated list. So he's out of luck. No stake for him. Yeah, he is on suicide watch. This guy thought he would have went home. All of a sudden, he didn't get bond. Remember, the first night that he was there, he was like an overnight guest. When they told his bond hearing, now they checked him into the system, and reality has hit him. And I understand that he has a shrink coming by his cell to see him several times a day. And now there's talk about putting him in, it's like a bubble. It's like a cell that has like a plexiglass wall in it, where they have inmates watching you. That's actually their job, to keep an eye on the inmates that are on suicide watch.
Diddy, once the untouchable mogul of the music industry, is now fighting for his life behind the cold steel walls of the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, a facility notorious for its inhumane conditions and history of neglect. Reports from inside the prison indicate that his health has taken a serious nosedive, and those closest to him fear he won't make it out alive. According to sources, Diddy has been struggling with extreme stress, lack of proper medical care, and the unrelenting pressure of life behind bars.
Sean Diddy Combs reportedly underwent treatment in a hospital as he continues to await trial on sex trafficking charges. According to Page 6, the 55-year-old was transported from Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, the federal prison where he was sent following his September arrest, late January 30th to undergo an MRI and was then soon returned to police custody later that night. The outlet cites a source as saying that the medical scan was authorized because his knee was bothering him. E! News has reached out to reps for Diddy and the Federal Bureau of Prisons for comment and has not heard back. The Grammy winner's attorney, Mark Agnafilo, tells TMZ, quote, "I cannot comment on anything related to prisoner movements. Also, I'm not commenting on anything related to possible medical issues." Diddy had shared in a since-deleted Instagram post in 2017 that he had undergone his third knee surgery in a year. The Federal Bureau of Prisons has neither confirmed nor denied the reports about Diddy's hospital visit.
The once vibrant entrepreneur is now reportedly weak, disoriented, and unable to cope with the brutal reality of his incarceration. His daughters, who have remained relatively quiet throughout his legal battle, are now speaking up, making it clear that they fear the worst. According to insider sources, Diddy's health has taken a severe turn for the worse since his incarceration. His daughters, who have been by his side throughout this ordeal, revealed that he's suffering from a combination of physical and mental health issues, including severe weight loss, chronic pain, and depression.
Sean Diddy Combs' legal team is getting a little smaller. As the rap mogul's defense team prepares for his May trial on sex trafficking charges, his attorney Anthony Rico respectfully but regrettably requested to be dismissed from his role, according to documents obtained by NBC News. Rico, who is one of 6 attorneys on the case, requested in the February 21st filing to withdraw as representation because, quote, "Under no circumstances can I continue to effectively serve as counsel for Sean Combs, consistent with the ABA standards for criminal justice." The motion continues, quote, "While I'm aware that the local rule requires that an application for withdrawal of counsel is supported and granted only upon a showing by affidavit or otherwise of satisfactory reasons for withdrawal, there are sufficient reasons related to the protections afforded by the attorney-client privilege for brevity in my application for withdrawal as counsel in this case." Rico noted that there wouldn't be a lapse in representation since.
In a tearful interview, they described visiting him in prison and seeing him in a state they've never seen before. "He's not the same person," one of his daughters said. "He's weak, he's broken, and we're terrified we're going to lose him." Insiders reveal that Diddy's health issues began almost immediately after his arrest, but the situation has now reached a breaking point. Sources say that he has been suffering from severe anxiety, drastic weight loss, and even fainting spells.
Now, that last charge I mentioned, i.e. count 3 in his indictment, transportation to engage in prostitution, well, Diddy's lawyers are wanting that charge thrown out, citing it's from a racist law. Just days before Anthony Rico filed a motion to withdraw from Diddy's counsel, Diddy's lawyers filed a motion to dismiss that charge because they argue no white person has ever been the target of a remotely similar prosecution. So that charge is known as the Mann Act, which was previously named by Congress as the White Slave Traffic Act, which made it illegal to transport people across state or international lines for the purpose of prostitution. Here's the thing, Diddy's lawyer says the law has a history of racial bias. Diddy's defense seems to be gearing up toward his alleged criminal conduct wasn't criminal. It was his personal business of what was going on in his bedrooms or hotels or wherever the freak-offs occurred. So they're saying that count 3 wasn't transportation to engage in prostitution, but was just him using escorts, male escorts at that, to bring in as a third with his girlfriends.
Some reports even claim that he's been denied necessary medical attention, leaving his condition to worsen by the day. His daughters have reportedly been pleading with prison officials, demanding that their father receive the care he needs, but so far their cries for help have fallen on deaf ears. Social media has exploded with reactions to the news, with hashtags like #Diddy'sHealth and #PrayForDiddy trending worldwide. Fans of the music mogul are expressing shock, heartbreak, and outrage, calling for better medical care and protection for Diddy while he's behind bars.
Not just from the federal trial, but also the dozens of civil lawsuits he still faces. But Diddy scored some wins behind bars. One of his civil lawsuits accusing him of raping a 13-year-old with Jay-Z back in 2000 was dismissed after the accuser dropped her lawsuit against the two moguls. Now, both vehemently denied the allegation, and Jay-Z, for his part, took it a step further and sued the accuser's attorney, Tony Busby, for extortion. However, despite that being dismissed, Diddy still faces a number of civil suits, even from accusers whose lawyer isn't Tony Busby. As for Diddy's federal criminal case, the stakes are high. He's facing a minimum of 15 years in prison, but a maximum of life behind bars. Let's break down the latest defense team shakeup with attorney and former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani. Nima, it's always great to see you, and thank you so much for joining me today. What's your reaction to Anthony Rico saying he's quitting the defense team, and how significant is it, being that Diddy's 3 months away from trial?
Many are questioning how someone as high profile as Diddy could be left in such a vulnerable state. At the same time, critics are pointing to the situation as a stark reminder of the consequences of his alleged actions, with some saying he's facing the reality of his choices. Metropolitan Detention Center is no place for the weak. This facility has long been criticized for dangerous living conditions, overcrowding, and frequent acts of violence. There have been multiple reports of inmate stabbings, unsanitary conditions, and lack of proper health care.
Diddy doesn't have that problem. He's got plenty of money. It could be a disagreement regarding defense strategy. It could be a conflict. It could be a health issue. It really could be anything. And the paperwork doesn't identify it, nor should it. And the fact that Mark Agnifilo is still on the case and the other counsel of record leads me to believe that the judge is going to rubber stamp this motion and grant it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was kind of surprised, like you were too, because even being inside the courtroom and throughout Diddy's hearings, you would see Diddy and Anthony kind of speaking to one another. He would always pass him notes while Mark Agnifilo made the arguments. Diddy and Anthony Rico would exchange hugs with one another. Anthony Rico always even made it a point to tell the judge Diddy's family traveled all the way to New York for his hearings. With all that being said, kind of going back to what potentially the reasoning might be.
Some inmates have even died due to medical neglect. And now it seems that Diddy is at risk of becoming another statistic. Let's take a closer look at how this story unfolded. Diddy, whose real name is Sean Combs, was arrested and charged earlier this year following a series of allegations that have rocked the music industry. The charges range from workplace harassment to more serious claims of abuse. And the case has been one of the most closely watched legal battles in recent memory. Diddy has consistently denied the allegations, calling them false and defamatory.
Potentially, it could be a conflict with the client, right? A disagreement. They just don't get along. The communication is poor. They don't agree on defense strategy. It could be a conflict with one of the other lawyers. Obviously, seems like Agnifilo is the lead on this case, although Rico was certainly his 1B. And I know obviously there's other lawyers on the case. Obviously, a lot of the victims are female. They're going to want female lawyers on the defense team, especially during some of the aggressive cross-examination. That tends to be the conventional wisdom when you're dealing with victims who are alleged victims of sexual assault or abuse. And then it could be a conflict with one of the victims themselves. Maybe maybe Rico consulted with them or even represented them in such a way that he has to get off the case. So it could be any number of potential conflicts.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, kind of just looking at the motion to withdraw too.
But his life in prison has become a focal point of the ongoing drama. His family is terrified. Diddy's daughters, Chance, Delilah, and Jessie, are heartbroken, struggling to come to terms with the fact that their father, the man who once seemed untouchable, is now vulnerable and at the mercy of a failing system. They are reportedly losing sleep, breaking down in tears, and desperately searching for answers as they watch their father's health deteriorate in real time.
Some states actually opened it up for both criminal and civil, and the criminal statute of limitations, at least in California where I am, was litigated and it was struck down as it violated the ex post facto clause of the Constitution. You can't retroactively make something criminal, but you can retroactively create civil liability even though the statute has run. So what states ended up doing is extending statute of limitations or even creating what we're seeing now, which are look-back windows. So you might say, well, if you file within 1 year, it doesn't matter when the sexual assault or sexual abuse happened, you can file. But really how this whole thing started, Cassie Ventura filed her lawsuit back in 2023 now because she was up against the statute of limitations in New York State. They were negotiating and the discussion was reportedly 10 million or 20 million or 30 million. They were unable to come to an agreement.
Diddy's daughters, who have remained largely private throughout this ordeal, decided to speak out after witnessing their father's rapid decline. In the emotional interview, they described how Diddy has been struggling to cope with the harsh conditions of prison life. He's in constant pain, one daughter revealed. He can barely eat and he's losing hope. It's like we're watching him fade away right before our eyes. The heartbreaking account has sparked outrage and concern, with many demanding answers from prison authorities about the lack of proper medical care.
Argument is the government interfering can violate a defendant's right to effective assistance of counsel. So Subramanian writes in his order, quote, in response to the motion, the government argues that there were no violations, but also that it won't offer as evidence the notes or any fruits of the notes. In a December 20th, 2024 ex parte letter, meaning it was filed only by the prosecution for the judge, but Subramanian acknowledges that the contents of which were later shared with the defense, the government outlined certain investigative steps taken upon receiving the notes, but it represented that it will not offer the evidence obtained pursuant to these investigative steps in the prosecution of the defendant, and that it intends to produce the evidence obtained from these steps to the defendant to the extent it has not already. Okay, so the prosecution is basically saying, we're not using what we found in this unit, and we turned over what we found to the defense.
Sources inside the facility claim that Diddy is no longer the same man who walked into prison just weeks ago. The stress of his legal troubles, combined with the relentless nature of prison life, has completely broken him. Friends and associates of Diddy have been quick to express their outrage, calling the situation unacceptable and inhumane. They argue that Diddy, despite the allegations against him, deserves to be treated with basic human dignity and provided with proper medical attention.
Now, there is one final piece we got to talk about here. The prejudice argument. You remember I mentioned that? To see if there was a Sixth Amendment violation, it's not just if there was intentional interference, but was Combs prejudiced? Judge Subramanian again says no. He concludes that even if there was an intentional interference, unless you can show the government is absolutely corrupt, Combs has to show that this would unfairly bias the jury against him. It would unfairly taint the case against him. In other words, you have to show that violations of his attorney-client privilege ends up producing evidence at trial that will be used against him. But once again, the government promised it's not using the notes or anything that came from the notes in its case against Combs, again, when it goes to trial in May. And Subramanian says that because the government provided information about this investigation and this whole ordeal, both the court and the defense, they're already ready. They're ready to flag any suspect evidence attempted to be put forward by the prosecution.
However, others close to the case suggest that Diddy's struggles in prison are a direct result of his alleged actions and the notoriety surrounding his case. Legal experts weigh in, suggesting that his deteriorating health could have serious implications for his legal battle, potentially swaying public opinion and even influencing the judge's decision. Unlike the luxurious life he once lived, Diddy is now just another inmate, forced to survive in a facility that doesn't care who he is.
Combs and his team had argued that we need to get a hearing to really get to the bottom of what Investigator 1 was up to. We should see his communications with prosecutors. He should have to testify. But Judge Subramanian concluded that none of that is necessary because he already ordered that such evidence and sworn statements be produced, and they were. In other words, the record is sufficient. Quote, here the government provided a lengthy affidavit by a member of the case team based on her review of relevant communications and conversations with other members of the case team and supervisors from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Investigator 1 also submitted an affidavit. Together, these documents presented a clear, factual narrative, which Combs then had the opportunity to respond to. The court also had the benefit of an in-camera review of the government's communications with Investigator 1. With such an extensive paper record to rule on, no live hearing is needed.
Guards allegedly ignore his requests for medical attention. Fellow inmates see him as a target, and his once unshakable confidence has been replaced with pure fear. This isn't just a story about Diddy. It's about the broader issues of health and accountability within the prison system. The heartbreaking revelations from his daughters have sparked important conversations about how inmates are treated and whether the system is equipped to provide adequate medical care. Some are calling for reforms to ensure that all prisoners, regardless of their status, are kept safe and healthy.
I don't know what you need 1,000. One bottle of baby oil goes a long way. I don't know what you need 1,000 for.
Yeah, it's the number of bottles going viral on social media, with Diddy's longtime nemesis, 50 Cent, dropping this meme on X. Meanwhile, Diddy's defense team offers this explanation.
I mean, he has a big house, he buys in bulk. You know, I think they have Costco's in every place where he has a home. I mean, have you sat in the parking lot of a Costco and see what people walk out of there with?
TMZ reached out to Costco. Their rep says none of their U.S. locations carry baby oil.
He believes he's innocent. I believe he's innocent. And we're going to fight this case with all of our might until we don't have to fight any longer. We're not giving up by a long shot. I told Mr. Combs I'm going to try and get his case to trial as quickly as possible. I don't think it was 1,000. Let's just say it's a lot, okay?
Others argue that Diddy's situation is a consequence of his alleged actions and that he must face the realities of prison life. Reports indicate that Diddy has been placed in isolation multiple times, not for his protection, but due to disciplinary reasons. Some insiders claim that he has been involved in verbal altercations with guards who refuse to acknowledge his deteriorating condition. Others say that he has been denied access to basic hygiene products, further worsening his health.
Why would some of these other inmates basically serve Diddy, cleaning up after him, making him this food, all of that? Do you think it's just because of his clout?
Well, I think maybe for some, some folks are just, you have a different makeup of individuals that are behind bars. And some of them may have idolized his music throughout the years. And some may think at some point maybe he'll do them a favor or solid or make some contacts for them, at some point, during their stay at the detention center. So I'm not surprised by that because I've also seen other high-profile inmates, not necessarily someone as famous as Mr. Combs, but some people with what we call street credibility, whose name is pretty popular in the streets in different communities across the country, and folks would want to just be around that type of energy. So,
with his health rapidly declining, the family is making one last desperate push for his release. Legal experts say that his lawyers are preparing to file an emergency motion, citing his deteriorating condition as a direct violation of his human rights. However, the court has shown no sympathy in the past, having already denied multiple bail requests. As the case continues to unfold, one question looms large. What's next for Diddy? Will his deteriorating health lead to changes in his prison conditions,
an interest in the outcome of the case. There's a potential bias. That doesn't mean he's not telling the truth, but I think it's important for everyone when they're viewing any of these witnesses to recognize that they need to see the whole picture before assuming that it's all true.
And one point in this bonus episode, I should say, that was particularly interesting to me is that Phil revealed during this episode that he was called to testify for the grand jury back in October. What do you think that means in terms of Diddy's case going forward, especially given that he was his former personal or executive assistant for that 2-year period? And do you think that it could also mean that he'll be called to testify once trial starts in May?
Great question. So yes, if they used him in the grand jury, it's very possible and plausible that they're going to use him to testify if and when there is a trial. One of the problems, though, that happens, Elizabeth, is when an individual continues to talk to various outlets.
Or will he continue to suffer behind bars? And how will this emotional ordeal impact his family and his legal case? For now, all eyes are on the prison system and the courtroom as the world waits to see how this story will unfold. The judge in his case has made it clear. Diddy is not getting out anytime soon. Despite his legal team arguing that his life is at risk inside MDC, the prosecution has opposed every attempt at securing bail, labeling Diddy a flight risk and a potential danger to the case.
And the big headline here is that now they are saying there are 2 more victims, 2 more women that the feds are calling victims of Diddy and his criminal operation, as they've laid it out in this indictment. Remember, before, all they had was victim 1, and we know through things that have been said in court and that are connecting victim 1 to the videotaped beating of Cassie. So we know that victim 1 is Cassie. Victims 2 and 3, who have now been added in this new document, we don't know their identities, but the feds have described them, saying that they are women that that Diddy transported for purposes of prostituting them. And they lay out some of the allegations and why they believe that these women are victims. Diddy is telling a different story, has a different view of this, but first, what they said in the indictment.
With the court unwilling to grant him even the slightest leeway, his family is left wondering if they will ever see him alive again. Meanwhile, supporters and fans are rallying behind Diddy, demanding justice. Some argue that even though he is facing legal consequences, he does not deserve to be denied basic medical care. Others believe that his current suffering is just the beginning of a much harsher punishment that he has yet to face. The public is divided. Some believe Diddy's imprisonment is justified.
Because that was my first thought, metal MRI, we probably can't put those 2 together. But as you pointed out, there was probably several different corrections officers or staff with him at the time. So it sounds like that probably went through successfully and he was returned back to MDC. But let's say, for instance, P. Diddy needs another surgery. He's had, I think, 3 so far, and he's been suffering from this knee ailment for about 20 years at this point. You mentioned the New York City Marathon back in 2003. So quite a while he's had this. Let's say that he does need another surgery. What would that look like? Because I know the recovery process for a knee replacement is extensive. When my mom had it, I had to move in with her and help her with day-to-day things, but that was much different at her house rather than at MDC. So let's just say, speculate, he's going through with this surgery and then he has to go through recovery at MDC. What would that look like?
Well, I mean, inmates have procedures all the time. I mean, you have.
While others argue that the legal system is failing him in ways that go beyond his charges. Regardless of where people stand, one thing is clear. His daughters are heartbroken, and they are watching their father's health slip away before their eyes. Diddy's legal team is not backing down. With pressure mounting and the media catching on to his declining health, his lawyers are making one last desperate attempt to secure a transfer or bail. If granted, Diddy could be moved to a medical facility or a different detention center with better healthcare access.
I'm going to say a jury doesn't just have to rely on what he says. They can even question whether or not, he has a motive in terms of wanting financial gain in the future. But the audios speak for themselves, and the audios create that corroboration that they need in order to say to jury, you can believe him because there's separate evidence that supports what he says. And by doing that, he kind of lays the groundwork. He gives you the background of what was going on behind the scenes. It might just be a piece of things, because remember, obviously he doesn't make out the entirety of the case, but it certainly gives the prosecution some of the steps they need to get to the ultimate, which is to find him guilty of the ultimate charges.
And obviously, Diddy's defense, they claim he's innocent. They deny all the allegations made in the lawsuits, all of that sort. But I think one kind of argument that the defense has been making throughout all of this case is that these acts were consensual. They were between consenting adults. But, just kind of hearing through either the lawsuits or through these documentaries,
But if denied, his health could deteriorate even further, possibly leading to fatal consequences. The next court hearing could be the most critical moment of his life. If his legal team fails to convince the judge, Diddy will remain behind bars, possibly facing months or even years of suffering. But the bigger question remains, will the legal system listen to the pleas of his daughters? Will the heartbreaking cries of his family be enough to change the judge's mind?
Following his September arrest, should be released from prison. He says in another message on the platform that same day, just for clarity, they're trying to make an example out of Puff. Kim Kardashian's ex-husband continues in an additional post, who's ever after Puff, we gotta find out exactly who they are. And Ye doesn't only come to the defense of Combs in his controversial internet rant, he also claps back at criticism of his wife Bianca Censori's naked look at the 2025 Grammys. He says in a February 7th post, people say the red carpet look was her decision. Yes, I don't make her do nothing she doesn't want to, but she definitely wouldn't have been able to do it without my approval, you stupid-ass woke pawns. The Yeezy founder goes on to allege that he has, quote, dominion over his wife, who he tied the knot with in 2022, stating, this ain't no woke-ass feminist shit. She's with a billionaire. Why would she listen to any of you dumbass broke bitches?
With each passing day, the dangers inside MDC grow. If his condition continues to worsen, his daughters could be faced with the unimaginable reality of losing their father before his case even goes to trial. They are not giving up. They are reportedly considering doing public interviews, speaking to major news outlets, and even holding press conferences to expose what's happening behind the walls of MDC. But will it be enough? The next few weeks will determine whether Diddy will be given a fighting chance, or if he will become another tragic story of a high-profile figure lost to the system. As this story continues to unfold, the world is watching. What do you think? Should Diddy be granted emergency bail due to his health? Or is this just another consequence of his alleged actions? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest updates on this developing story.